about you, and it's no one else like you is what they're getting. Positive vibes only. Shout out to King Saul's boss in the building about you, and it's no one else like you is what they're getting. Positive vibes only. Shout out to King Saul's boss in the building about you, and it's no one else like you is what they're getting. Positive vibes only. Shout out to King Saul's boss in the building about you, and it's no one else
in his church. But as it turns out, Zachary was a hardcore pedophile. Zachary was arrested last year after authorities were given a tip. And when they investigated him, what they found was nothing short of disturbing. Since at least 2011, Zachary had been molesting children whose ages ranged from 12 to 17 years old. He had also been soliciting these children to have them send him sexually abusive material. And while all this was going on, he was playing for large crowds and hanging out with the political elite. So Zachary was finally arrested in October of 2024. Zachary was finally arrested in 2024. And in 2025, this is what the judge presiding over his case had to say. I don't say this lightly at all, not how I operate my life, and certainly not how I operate as a judge. But in my 25 so plus years, I've seen a lot. This ranks up with one of the most egregious predators I have ever seen as it regards individuals. Thankfully, I think Zachary's going to be in prison for a long time, but it always seems like these groups, like youth groups at churches, attract the worst of the worst from society. For a guy like Zachary, he might have seen an open buffet.
The urban legend about mermaids, and it involves Mario Moreno, aka Cantinflas. I don't know if you know who that is.
Of course, yeah.
For those of you who don't know who that is a very, very famous Mexican actor. At the very peak of his career, he had everything he ever wanted. He was a top comedian for, the Mexican industry. He had the houses, the money, his family was set. But in this urban legend, it's told that even though he had everything he ever wanted, there was one thing that he was never able to experience. Well, see a mermaid. So he was at a bar one day by himself, and then some guy by the name of Carlos Lorenzo approaches him and is like, "Do you really want to see a mermaid?" And he's like, "Yeah, that's all I ever wanted." He had this obsession with mermaids, and he wanted to see a real life mermaid. So this guy Carlos tells him, "Okay, what you're gonna do is you're gonna buy a mansion by the edge of the sea, and you're gonna have a statue of you facing out into the ocean, and whenever you go at night and you stand next to that statue and you look down into the water, you're going to see mermaids." So that's exactly what he did. And he actually made a statue exactly how the legend says, that's facing, waiting for something in the ocean.
Oh, it's a real life statue?
Yeah.
Oh, what the?
It is also said that sometimes at night you can still see some mermaids approaching, waiting for him to be at the edge of the house and shit.
What the?
Like I said, this is just an urban legend.
Yeah, of course.
And also, I want to pull up a couple of videos that went viral years ago. And
Whenever mermaids were popular?
At this time, bro, I feel like mermaids were like at its peak.
I feel like what kind of boosted its popularity was the mockumentary, Mermaids the Body Found.
There were 3 childhood friends who always swore they'd stick together. Best friends to the end, they used to say. Kyle was the grounded one, Dave was the brains, and then there was Jimmy, the wild card. Addicted to poker and chasing adrenaline like it was oxygen. Over time, Jimmy's addiction spiraled out of control. He racked up huge losses until one day, he found himself in $30,000 in debt to the kind of men who were very dangerous. They gave him a deadline, pay up or die. Panicked, Jimmy turned to Kyle and Dave. Desperate, he explained everything. After a long pause, they looked at him and said the words they always did, best friends to the end, and they meant it. They agreed to help, and Jimmy had a plan, a bank job. A in-and-out job and $50,000 split 3 ways, enough to pay the debt and disappear for good. But as they pulled up to the bank, a black van screeched to a stop in front of them. Before they could react, 5 masked men jumped out, guns drawn. Everything went black. When Kyle and Dave woke up, they were gagged and tied on the floor of the van, heart pounding in the darkness. Then they saw Jimmy, sitting calmly, staring at them. "I'm sorry, guys," he said, emotionless. "But I need more than 50 grand, and the organ market is booming these days."
Kealana Turner's body has just been found a year after she mysteriously disappeared, and only 900 feet from where her car was found abandoned. This story is incredibly heartbreaking. So, 28-year-old Kealana disappeared on March 10th, 2023. The night before she disappeared, she was staying with a friend in Silsbee, Texas, but when that friend left for work, Kealana appeared lost and confused. She reached out to a friend in Austin and told him that she didn't know where she was, so it's believed that she was planning on driving to Austin. But later that day, she ended up at a house in Tomball, Texas, and fell fell asleep in her car in the driveway. The woman who owned the house didn't know Kaylana at all, and when she refused to leave the driveway, the woman called the police. When police arrived, they tried to open up her door, but Kaylana backed up and almost hit one of the deputies. She then crashed into a fence on the front lawn. A deputy then grabbed a 2x4 piece of wood and broke in Kaylana's driver's side window, which made her drive off, and she ended up crashing into a wooded area about a mile away. She then got out and started running barefoot into the woods, leaving behind her purse and phone. This was the last time that she was ever seen alive. Her family says that she was having a mental health crisis
about you, and it's no one else like you is what they're getting. Positive vibes only.
Asthma, but she also had PTSD, and she was recently prescribed a different medication for that. Her family believes that she may have had a bad reaction to the new meds, and in the 4 days before she went missing, she had hardly slept at all. So when she woke up in that woman's driveway, she was disoriented and likely in a fight or flight mode. Over the year that Kaylana was missing, there were multiple searches for her, but it was like she vanished into thin air. That is until April 19th of this year, when Texas EquuSearch was conducting a search for her on a private property in Magnolia. This was actually supposed to be their final search for her, but during that final search, they stumbled across human remains in a heavily wooded area. And after comparing dental records, it was confirmed that the remains belonged to Kaylana. What's incredibly sad is that her body was found only 900 feet from where her car was found abandoned a year ago. Her cause of death is still being determined, but authorities say no foul play is suspected. Kaylana's family says that the day she went missing, authorities treated her like a fugitive and didn't realize that she was in the middle of a mental health crisis. Instead, they reacted to her in such a hostile way. And it's left many wondering, had they realized that she was in the middle of a mental health crisis, if this would have turned out any different. Authorities were telling the family and putting out information that just wasn't true, which included sightings of Kaylana. And it really seems like authorities just didn't take the case seriously from the very beginning. Just by looking at the Facebook page created to help finding her, it's so clear how much Kaylana was loved by everyone. She was a person that was filled with love and kindness, and there truly was just no one like her. I'm wishing her family nothing but peace and healing during this horrible time, and I'm hoping that more answers will come to light.
It's known as Canada's most spooky crime case, so don't say I didn't warn you. This is the case of the Jack family. Firstly, before I get into this crime case today, I really want to just say a massive thank you for 1 million followers. It feels very surreal. It feels almost like a practical joke. Not sure why this has happened, but thank you so much, guys, for sticking with me and for your lovely comments and your lovely messages. I really do appreciate absolutely every single one of you. I've got some really exciting new things coming up, which I can't wait to announce, and I'm going to be using my platform to spread more awareness about cases like this. It was 1989 in British Columbia, Canada. Ronald and Doreen Jack were childhood sweethearts. They were a lovely couple, but they lived in poverty the majority of their childhood, so money was always tight. They were always used to scrimping and saving. They had 2 sons, Russell and Ryan, aged 9 and 4, and they really had to graft to get by in life. Unfortunately, though, Ronald suffered a back injury, and this actually left him without a job, unable to work for a while, and therefore they were obviously struggling even more financially. Some reports even say that Doreen had to resort to stealing at some points, things like children's medicine when her kids were sick, which is just, I can't imagine being in that such a desperate situation. It's also believed that Ronald might have run up some debts as well, but they'd really do anything to make ends meet, even if it meant jumping on any opportunities that came their way. And it felt at the time almost like somebody was looking out for them. Ronald suddenly was approached in a pub by a stranger with this amazing opportunity. Now, it almost seemed too good to be true. There was a job available at a logging camp. They would get transport there. Doreen could work there as a cook as well, and they would even arrange childcare for their children. They felt like they had no option but to grab this opportunity with both hands. They were last seen getting into a random man's truck, supposedly due to return after 2 weeks. And this is roughly what this man looked like, the stranger whose truck they got into. The sketch was done quite far down the line and was compiled from some eyewitness accounts. On the 2nd of August 1989, Ronald gave his mum a ring and she would never hear of him again. Now, as I said, the family were due to be gone for 2 weeks, so it was only really after this time had passed that their family and friends really started to worry about them. There was no sign of them at all. They just never returned, and they were officially reported missing on the 25th of the month. Their extended family were really frustrated about the lack of urgency from authorities. It kind of just seemed like they were dragging their feet. Time went on and help was really very few and far between, and there was no news about the family. That was until police got a call on the 28th of January 1996. Bear in mind, this was almost a decade after the family went missing, and this call was absolutely terrifying. A mysterious voice on the end of the line stated, "The Jack family are buried in the south end of," and then they said an unspecified ranch. And nobody had a clue about who this mystery caller was. They left no information about themselves, and there was also seemingly no kind of motive for somebody to leave a message like this. A university even tried to analyze the voice at the end of the phone, but to this day, the caller has yet to be identified. Now, the family felt the lack of coverage given to the case was due to them being Indigenous people. Crime Stoppers eventually offered up to $2,000 for information leading to the whereabouts of the Jack family. But to this day, 35 years later, there is still no sign of them. It seems like they vanished into thin air.
15-year-old James Gordon picked up a .22 caliber long barrel rifle and executed his entire family. His father, his mother, and his 17-year-old sister. No struggle, no warning, just cold, calculated murder. When questioned, James showed little emotion. He said he hated them, claiming he was sick of his mother's constant chewing, his sister's annoying accent, and his father's disapproval of his political opinions. After a 6-month trial, James wasn't found guilty. He was found insane. The jury believed he wasn't in his right mind and acquitted him of all charges, sending him to Rusk State Hospital in Texas in 1968. He spent 6 years there before being quietly released back into the world. 2 years later, James disappeared completely. He changed his name, severed ties with his past, and vanished into society. Until 40 years later, James reemerged, this time as an award-winning professor of psychology. He had built an entirely new life, one filled with accolades, recognition, and students who admired him. But when his real identity was uncovered, it sent shockwaves through the community. Even the mayor called for his removal, labeling him a murderer hiding in plain sight. But the university refused. They stood by him, saying he had served his time and that the man he used to be no longer existed. This case is as disturbing as it is surreal. A teenager killer who butchered his own family, now shaping young minds in a classroom. It makes you wonder, how well do we ever really know the people around us?
So have you ever heard your name just out of nowhere and you're like, yo, wait, did my mom call me? You go to your mom, she's not the one who called you.
Yeah, all the time, bro. Yeah.
Or your little sister, or your brother, or your older brother. So the scary way of looking at it, and the scary way that people think of it, is that it's actually demons trying to take your soul and trying to bring you into a different dimension. Or it could also be an evil entity in the house itself trying to fuck with you. But then there's another way of looking at it, or somebody in your family in dear need of help, and it's their soul literally reaching out to you in the spirit world.
Yo, I got the fucking chills, bro. What the that's actually like a really, really
interesting way of seeing it.
Yeah, I never thought of it like that.
Like on some telepathic, bro. Some other people are also saying that it's your spirit guides and stuff like that. So there's many ways of seeing that, but I know a lot of people have experienced the whole hearing your name and you're just like,
I remember one time, right? So I was home alone. I think I was in a room playing video games or something like that. I forgot what it was. And then I hear the door open. Because I used to have bells on my door. But I heard the bells. And I heard, like, my mom usually ends up greeting my dog with, like, a baby voice. Like, hi, Rocky. Like stuff like that.
No way.
And I heard her say, hi, Rocky. But, like, no one was there.
Oh, that's scary.
When I heard it, I thought it was my mom. But after a while, I noticed that there was no more noise. So I went to the living room. Rocky was in his bed sleeping. And nobody was home.
That's scary.
Like, I know I didn't hear my name, but I heard like my mom's voice. Rocky.
That's weird, bro. Imagine it even scarier, bro. You, oh my gosh, hey Rocky, and then instead of like.
Actress Michelle Trachtenberg was found dead this morning in New York City, and tributes to her are already flooding across social media. It isn't known exactly how Michelle died, but it is known that she recently received a liver transplant. So people are hypothesizing that this could have had something to do with that. Michelle started her acting career at just 3 years old, appearing in commercials. And I definitely remember her starring in a number of shows and movies when I was younger, including shows like The Adventures of Pete and Pete and Harriet the Spy. Michelle also had prominent roles in shows like Gossip Girl and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and people all over the world loved the roles that she took on and the films and TV shows that she appeared in. Now, Michelle in the past had been pretty open about some of the abuse that she faced on the sets of TV shows and movies that she worked on. And I think that this news comes as a shock to a lot of people because, like I mentioned before, she was only 39 years old. Obviously, this is really sad news and my thoughts go out to her family. But if we find anything else out, I'll be sure to update everybody on here. And yeah, this is just really sad news.
What you're about to see is an attempted kidnapping of a child while at school by this man. This video is incredibly disturbing, so watch at your own risk. This is 33-year-old Solomon Galligan. He's a registered sex offender who recently tried to kidnap a young boy at school. At around 2:20 p.m. on April 19th, he walked onto the playground of Black Forest Hills Elementary School and approached the fifth graders who were at recess. After a few minutes, he lunged at the children and tried to grab a young boy before tripping and falling over a blanket that he was carrying. Solomon then got back up and tried going after the boy again, but the other kids ran away and started yelling "stranger danger," which is what caught the teacher's attention and made Solomon leave the school property. Obviously, because of this, authorities were notified, and the boy who Solomon targeted told police his description and that he had white powder on his face and smelled like alcohol. The Cherry Creek School District then emailed the parents explaining what happened and said that if they wanted to pick up their kids as a result, that it was okay to do so. And after seeing this email, one of the parents saw a man fitting Solomon's description at a nearby Walgreens and contacted authorities. It was there that police found Solomon, who asked to be taken to the hospital after claiming to have been assaulted. After taking him to an urgent care, an officer ran a background check on him and found that he was a registered sex offender. Solomon was then arrested and has since been charged with kidnapping and child abuse. He is currently being held in the Arapahoe County Jail on a $25,000 bond. What's incredibly alarming is that Solomon has a lengthy criminal history, which includes charges of assault, burglary, and sex crimes. In 2011, he was convicted on a charge of non-consent sexual contact. And according to his family, he's been in and out of jail for the past 12 years, but he always gets a slap on the wrist and is let out. Solomon's family says that his troubles really began when he was 16 years old and diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. They said that he ran away a lot and always seemed to get into trouble, but he ran away for good when he was 18 years old. He reportedly ends up in jail every 6 months or so, and his family says that that's the only time that they ever know where he's at. They also said that they're happy when he's in jail because he's not out causing harm to innocent people. His family thinks that the system is failing him and his victims because of the horrible cycle of being arrested, then being deemed incompetent to stand trial because of his mental health. He's then sent off to be institutionalized, but every single time there's always a shortage of beds in the mental health facilities, so he's always released back into society. As for the school, the Cherry Creek School District is reportedly launching an investigation into how Solomon went unnoticed for so long on school property. The school released a statement saying that improvements are being made and that they've changed the supervision area so that teachers on recess always have full visibility of the students. They've gone on to say that all staff have been retrained in safety protocols, but it took 10 full days to have the meeting and for these new protocols to be put in place. Because of this, parents of the kids at the school want the principal to be fired and have certain employees be put on administrative leave, but the school won't take any action until the investigation is complete. This story is so scary, and I can't even imagine what it was like to see this man running up to you, especially as a child.
Massive trigger warning here. This beauty queen's murder is known as Australia's most barbaric killing ever. It was February 1986 in New South Wales, Australia. Anita Cobby, as you can see, was a beautiful 26-year-old woman. She'd been in beauty pageants from a young age and clearly was extremely stunning. You could honestly have made it as a professional model, but her heart was actually in nursing. Her mum Peggy had been a nurse when she was growing up, and she really just kind of had this love for it. She wanted to follow in her mum's footsteps. So she trained as a nurse too and was working in Sydney Hospital when she met her husband John Cobby. The pair ended up getting married in 1982, but unfortunately they ended up separating. In the year in question, she was living with her parents. Now, this is a little bit confusing, but I think that the couple were just kind of on and off. They had split up, but they were on really good terms, and they'd even considered getting back together. But Anita's tragic murder meant they never got the chance to rekindle their love. Now, as I said, Anita worked in Sydney Hospital and had a bit of a commute on the train to and from her job every day. On the 2nd of February, she finished her shift at 3 p.m. and headed for some food with her girlfriends. After she did that, she headed back on the train home to Blacktown Station. And it was kind of regular that she would get back to the station and use a public phone to either call for her family to give her a lift or call a taxi. But for some reason on the day in question, she didn't make that call. And some some believe that this was due to the payphone being out of order. Anita was spotted by witnesses walking home alone and then seemingly vanished. Her parents were obviously very concerned when she never turned up home. They reported her missing to police, but it wasn't long before a tragic discovery was made. Anita's lifeless body was found by a farmer in a secluded paddock, and she horrifically had to be identified by her wedding ring, which she was still wearing. As I said, the pair had kind of decided to almost like get back together. And because of this, Anita's husband was prime suspect from early on, but he was very quickly ruled out due to having an alibi. Anita's autopsy revealed some devastating information. The innocent woman had been brutally attacked, and when I say brutally attacked, like, it doesn't even bear thinking about your loved one going through this. She'd been essayed, tortured, and almost decapitated by her attacker or attackers. And the public outcry only grew when the gruesome details were announced on a radio show to the general public. Now, it transpired that a white car had been stolen that evening, and a tip-off came in which led police to a group of men. This was John Travers and Michael Murdoch, both 19, and three brothers, Leslie Murphy, 22, Gary Murphy, 28, and Michael Murphy, 33. Now, this group all had a huge history of crime and criminal behavior. They had violent crime, theft, substance use, armed robbery, and are on their records. John was also seemingly well known in the area for carrying a weapon. And John pretty much very quickly admitted to stealing that white car and was arrested. And all of the men were quickly telling very different stories. So it was clear that nobody was telling the truth. John's girlfriend, obviously by this point, was very suspicious of John herself, hearing all of this stuff in the news, and she agreed to help police by wearing a wire. It transpired the group of men had pulled up to Anita in the stolen car that night and forced her inside, kicking and screaming. It also came out later that a witness had in fact seen Anita get dragged into this car and did report this to police. The group viciously SA'd her despite her pleas to be let go. They broke her nose and cheekbones and repeatedly AR'd her. They drove her to a remote paddock and almost decapitated her before leaving her there to die. And it's believed that they did this because they were just convinced that she knew who they were. So in order to get away with it, they might as well just kill her. I cannot imagine the kind of person you have to be to not only do this, but also have friends that you feel comfortable enough calculating this with and coming up with such an evil plan, because these men clearly went out that evening with the intention to do this. Thankfully, all of these men were found guilty of R and murder and were given life without the possibility of parole.
However, according to the phrase, you can't make this stuff up, might have known the story of real-life boogeyman Albert Fish, a slight, elderly man with grey hair. No one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
These are scary games to play in real life, part 1. This game is called the Picture Game, and it's a paranormal game that allows you to take pictures of ghosts. To play the game, you will need at least 2 people and a phone with a flash. Then find an empty room and sit directly across from each other. Then turn off the lights and hold hands and say, "I trust you," to each other. Now say, "The door is open, please come in," 3 times at the same time. Now open your eyes. Whatever wanted to come into the room is now in there. Now each of you grab your phone and take a picture of each other while saying, "I caught you." Now do this 3 times each. Now both of you close your eyes again and say, "It's time to go home." Turn on the lights and then look at the photos you guys took of each other. One of you would then see a ghost standing behind you, and the other one won't, but the person that has the ghost behind them will experience paranormal activity for at least a week. Now, the ghost won't harm you at all, but it would do its best to completely terrify you. So, are you playing this game? Because I'm definitely not.
Murder conviction was overturned after the eyewitness was found to be legally blind. A man from Chicago spent 12 years behind bars due to eyewitness testimony from someone who was found to be legally blind. Darian Harris was just 18 years old when he was convicted of the murder of Rondell Moore. Rondell had been shot at a petrol station in 2011 and had passed away. Darian was previously sentenced to 76 years in prison for the crime and is now 30 years old. However, a recent revelation changed all of that. The eyewitness Dexter Saffold proved crucial in the murder conviction and picked Darien out of a police lineup just a few days after the killing. Darien's family, though, maintained that he'd actually been at home watching the NBA playoffs.
About you, and it's no one else like you is what they're getting. Positive vibes only.
High school when he was accused
Shout out to King Saul's boss in the
Dexter was
building.
later found to have been legally blind during the fatal shooting. It transpired that he had markedly reduced vision, especially at night. Prosecutors are reportedly planning to retry Darien on the murder charge.
I was stranded in an airport for 18 years. My name is Mehran Karimi Nasri, and I was born in 1942 in Iran. My story is quite unique. In 1986, I attempted to travel to England to seek political asylum, but unfortunately, I lost my documents during a layover in Paris. Without proper documentation, I found myself stuck at Charles de Gaulle Airport. The French authorities couldn't allow me entry into France, and I couldn't return to Iran as I feared for my life. So, I remained stranded in the airport transit zone from 1988 to 2006. Over the years, I learned to survive in this confined space, relying on the generosity of passengers and airport staff for food and other necessities. My life was marked by a daily routine of sleeping on a bench, reading newspapers, and writing in my journal. My story garnered international media attention, inspiring the movie The Terminal, starring Tom Hanks. Eventually, in 2006, I was hospitalized for health issues, and the French authorities granted me permission to reside in France. Since then, I have been living in a shelter, attempting to rebuild my life after those long years spent in the airport.
These are videos humans were never meant to see. Okay, so we all...
What are you talking about? Really being held captive. Okay? It is a hostage. What are you talking about? My fault. The beats is blasting. The beats is beating. We got some shit to unbox because you know we have new decks on the way. Wait, new waves for the play bay. Tell them to go play with their mother. Coño, pero yo.